The papers sliced through the air and landed on Lena Walker's chest with a sound that seemed to echo through the sterile hospital room. Her fingers, still trembling from 18 hours of labor and emergency surgery, brushed against the corner of the manila envelope. The morphine drip attached to her arm beeped steadily, a cruel reminder that she was alive to witness this moment. Sign it, not tomorrow. Not next week. Right now, Ethan said. His voice came from somewhere near the door. Lena couldn't turn her head without pain shooting through her abdomen where they'd cut her open just hours ago to save her life and deliver 4 babies. 4 tiny humans who'd fought to exist inside her body for 9 months while she bled, swelled, and prayed through every complication the doctors warned her about. What is this? Her voice sounded foreign to her own ears, thin and hollow, like it belonged to someone else. Someone whose world wasn't currently imploding. Divorce papers. Ethan stepped closer but still kept his distance, as if her exhaustion might be contagious. I'm done with this marriage. Sign them so we can both move on. Lena's vision blurred. She blinked hard, trying to focus on his face, searching for any trace of the man she'd married 7 years ago. The man who'd promised her forever under a canopy of string lights. The man who'd held her hand during their first apartment viewing and said home was wherever they were together. That man had vanished somewhere between his corner office and this hospital room, replaced by a stranger in an expensive suit who looked at her like she was an inconvenience he needed to schedule around. Ethan, please, she whispered, her hand reaching toward him weakly. I just had surgery. Can we talk about this later? Please. I can barely think straight. There's nothing to discuss. His jaw tightened. I've already made arrangements. Child support will be handled through my lawyer. You'll be fine. The machines around her beeped louder, or maybe it was just her heartbeat pounding in her ears. 4 clear bassinets lined the wall to her left. 3 pink blankets. 1 blue. Her babies. Their babies. She'd nearly died bringing them into this world, had felt her consciousness slipping away on that operating table while doctors shouted medical terms she didn't understand and bright light seared into her closing eyes. But the babies, Lena's voice cracked. You haven't even held them yet. Don't you want to? I'll see them when appropriate. Ethan glanced at his watch. I have somewhere to be. The door swung open before Lena could respond, and the sharp click of heels against linoleum announced Margaret Walker's entrance before Lena saw her. Her mother-in-law swept into the room like a cold front, arms crossed, lips pressed into that familiar expression of disapproval that Lena had endured for 5 years. Oh, you're crying, Margaret observed, her tone suggesting this was somehow disappointing rather than expected. How predictable. Mom, Ethan started, but Margaret raised one perfectly manicured hand. Let me handle this. She turned to Lena, and something cruel flickered behind her eyes. You finally did it. After 5 years of embarrassing this family, after all the whispers at charity galas about whether Ethan had married someone defective, you managed to get pregnant. Congratulations. But let's not pretend this changes anything. Lena felt something crack inside her chest, something that had been barely holding together. I gave him 4 children. After making us wait 5 years, Margaret snapped. 5 years of questions. 5 years of my friends asking if there was a problem. 5 years of you failing at the one thing women are supposed to be able to do naturally. Don't act like you've performed some miracle. You did the bare minimum, far too late. The words landed like physical blows. Lena had spent those 5 years crying in bathroom stalls at the hospital where she worked as a nurse. She'd endured 17 negative pregnancy tests, each one feeling like her body was betraying her. She'd sat through countless doctor appointments where medical professionals used words like unexplained infertility and unlikely without intervention, their sympathetic faces only making her feel more broken. She'd watched Ethan's patience erode month by month, had seen the way he stopped touching her casually, stopped asking about her day, stopped looking at her like she was someone he'd chosen rather than someone he was stuck with. And through it all, Margaret had been there with her pointed comments and strategic sighs, reminding Lena that she was failing at the most fundamental expectation of being Ethan Walker's wife. "Sign the papers," Ethan repeated, his voice cutting through her thoughts. "I'm moving forward with someone who fits my life. Someone who understands what I need." The casual cruelty of it stole Lena's breath. "Someone who fits your life. Ethan, I'm your wife. I just gave you 4 children. I almost died. The doctors said if we'd waited another 10 minutes. But you didn't die," Margaret interrupted. "You're here. You're fine. And now you can move on with your life while Ethan moves on with his. That's how these things work." Lena stared at the papers on her chest. The ink was still wet on her son's birth certificate, and now they wanted her to sign away her marriage with hands that could barely hold a pen. Around her, monitors tracked her vital signs, reminded everyone in the room that she was technically alive, even though she felt like something inside her had stopped beating. "There's someone else, isn't there?" The words came out before Lena could stop them. Ethan's silence was answer enough. "Subscribe now because what happens next will change everything you think you know about karma." Margaret smiled, the expression sharp and satisfied. "Her name is Vanessa Clark. Beautiful girl. Comes from the Clark family, you know, the venture capitalists. She and Ethan have been seeing each other for several months now. She's everything this family needs. Class, connections, breeding." The room spun. Lena tried to process the timeline. Several months. She'd been pregnant for 9 months. Which meant Ethan had started this affair while she was carrying his children. While her body was swelling and aching and bleeding in ways that terrified her. While she lay awake at night feeling 4 tiny lives moving inside her and praying they'd all survive. "You were cheating on me while I was pregnant." Her voice came out as barely a whisper. "Don't be dramatic," Ethan said, but he wouldn't meet her eyes. "Vanessa and I connected at a professional level. It's not like..." "Not like what?" Lena's voice rose despite the pain it caused. "Not like you were sleeping with her while I was on bed rest. Not like you were building a new life while I was trying to keep your babies alive inside me. Our situation was complicated," Ethan said, his tone suggesting this should be obvious. "You were always tired, always sick, always at some doctor's appointment. Vanessa understood the pressures I was under. She didn't make everything about her pregnancy symptoms or her fears. She actually supported my career." Lena couldn't speak. The morphine made everything feel distant and fuzzy, but the pain in her chest was sharp and immediate. This was the man she'd loved. The man she'd built a life with. The man she'd nearly died for just hours ago. "I have a car waiting," Margaret announced, checking her phone. "Ethan, Vanessa is expecting you. Don't keep her waiting. She's not as patient as some people." Ethan nodded and moved toward the door, and Lena realized with horror that he was actually leaving. He was walking away from her, from 4 newborn babies, from everything they'd built together, and he wasn't even looking back. "Wait," Lena called out, her voice breaking. "Please, Ethan. Just wait. Can we please talk about this when I'm not?" "There's nothing to talk about," he said, hand on the door. "My lawyer will be in touch about custody arrangements and support. You'll be taken care of financially. That should be enough." "Should be enough?" Lena repeated, tears streaming down her face. "I'm your wife. Those are your children. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" Ethan finally looked at her, really looked at her, and what Lena saw in his eyes was worse than anger or hatred. It was indifference. Complete, absolute indifference. "It meant something once," he said quietly. "But that was before." "Before what?" "Before I realized I wanted more." The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like the end of everything. Margaret lingered for a moment, her eyes scanning the 4 bassinets with an expression that might have been regret on anyone else but looked more like calculation on her face. Don't contact us about the children, Margaret said coldly. You'll get your support payments. Use them wisely. And don't think about playing the victim to our friends or the press. We have lawyers for that. She paused at the door, turning back one last time. You survived. That's more than some women can say. Be grateful for that. Then she was gone too, and Lena was alone with 4 sleeping babies and a future that had just shattered into pieces she couldn't even begin to collect. Nurse Carla found her 20 minutes later, still frozen in the same position, tears streaming silently down her face, the unsigned divorce papers crumpled in her shaking hands. The older woman's face filled with such fury that Lena almost felt afraid. I saw him leave, Carla said quietly, gathering the papers and setting them aside. I saw her too. And I want you to know something, honey. I've been a labor and delivery nurse for 32 years. I've seen a lot of terrible things. But what just happened in this room? That's a special kind of evil. She took Lena's hand gently. You rest now. Those babies need you strong. And that man? He just made the biggest mistake of his pathetic life. Lena wanted to believe her. But right then, drowning in pain and betrayal and exhaustion, all she could do was close her eyes and pray for the strength to face tomorrow. 3 months crawled by like years. Lena lived in a fog of feeding schedules, diaper changes, and sleepless nights that blurred into sleepless days. Her 1-bedroom apartment felt impossibly small with 4 cribs crammed into every available space. She survived on frozen meals and coffee, her nursing scrubs hanging looser on her frame every week. The child support payments came like clockwork, deposited automatically into her account, cold and impersonal, like everything else about Ethan now. She didn't hear from him. Not once. No calls to check on the babies. No texts asking for photos. Nothing. Meanwhile, Ethan Walker's life was unraveling in ways he couldn't have predicted. The penthouse Vanessa insisted on cost 3 times his mortgage used to. The furniture she ordered without consulting him arrived with invoices that made his hands shake. Every dinner became an argument about money, about status, about why they weren't moving in the circles she expected. My friend Rebecca just got a place in the Hamptons, Vanessa said one evening, scrolling through Instagram with a glass of wine. Why are we still renting in the city like college graduates? Because I have 4 children I'm supporting, Ethan snapped, exhaustion making him careless. Because I have expenses you don't seem to understand. Vanessa looked up slowly, her expression cooling. Then maybe you should work harder. Make partner. My father knows people. But you have to be worth the introduction, Ethan. Right now, you're just adequate. The word adequate hit him like a slap. He'd sacrificed everything for this life. He'd left his wife hours after she'd given birth. He'd abandoned 4 newborn babies. And for what? To be adequate. His phone buzzed against the marble countertop. An email from his lawyer with the subject line that would change everything, urgent, Lena Walker estate update. Ethan opened it, annoyed, expecting some request for increased support or custody arrangement changes. The first line made him freeze. Lena's uncle, Harrison Montgomery, passed away last month in London. As his only living relative, the entire estate transfers to her per his will. Ethan scrolled faster, his heart beginning to pound. Property holdings across 3 continents. Commercial real estate portfolios. Investment accounts. Stock options. The Montgomery fortune, built over 4 generations, consolidated into a single heir. His eyes locked on the final figure. Total estimated value, $500 billion. $500 billion. The phone slipped from his fingers and shattered against the floor, screen fragmenting into a spider web of cracks that seemed to mirror something breaking inside him. What now? Vanessa's voice cut through his shock. Did your card decline again? Because I need to. Lena, Ethan whispered. Lena just inherited $500 billion. The wine glass in Vanessa's hand stopped halfway to her lips. For once, she was speechless. "That's impossible," she finally said. "She's a nurse. She clips coupons. She probably shops at Target." "Her uncle," Ethan said, his voice sounding distant to his own ears. "Harrison Montgomery. I knew she had family in London, but she never talked about money. Never mentioned that her uncle was." He couldn't finish the sentence. The Montgomery name was legendary in financial circles. Old money. Real money. The kind of wealth that shaped economies. And it all belonged to Lena now. His Lena. The woman he'd divorced while she was recovering from surgery. The woman whose babies he'd walked away from. The woman he'd replaced with Vanessa Clark in her Hampton House dreams. Vanessa's expression shifted, calculations happening behind her eyes. "Well," she said slowly, carefully. "This changes things, doesn't it? I mean, she's the mother of your children. Maybe you two could work something out. Be friendly. Co-parent effectively. You could." "Could what?" Ethan's voice came out harsh. "Ask for my marriage back. She blocked my number, Vanessa. Building security has orders to keep me out. I haven't seen my own children in 3 months because she won't return my lawyer's calls about visitation." The reality was crushing him now. He'd thought he was trading up, leaving behind someone ordinary for someone extraordinary. But Lena had never been ordinary. He'd just been too blind to see it. Subscribe now because the confrontation that's coming will leave you speechless. His phone, the shattered one on the floor, buzzed with another notification. Then another. His email was flooding with messages. News alerts. LinkedIn notifications. The business world was already reacting to the Montgomery inheritance, and Lena's name was everywhere. Then came the message that made his blood run cold. A formal summons. Not to court for custody. To his own office building in Midtown Manhattan. To Davidson and Pierce Real Estate, the firm where he'd sacrificed everything to make partner. The meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. the next morning. No explanation. Just a requirement to attend. Ethan barely slept. He arrived 15 minutes early, his best suit pressed, his apology rehearsed. He'd explain. He'd grovel if necessary. Surely Lena wouldn't destroy him. Surely she'd remember what they'd had once, before everything went wrong. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt like ascending to his own execution. The doors opened, and his assistant Angela looked at him with something like pity. "They're waiting for you in the main boardroom," she said softly. "Mr. Pierce is already inside." The boardroom doors were heavy oak, imported from somewhere expensive. Ethan had always loved these doors, loved what they represented. Power. Success. Arrival. Now they felt like the entrance to his tomb. He pushed them open. And stopped breathing. Lena sat at the head of the conference table where Mr. Pierce usually sat. But this wasn't the exhausted, broken woman from the hospital. This wasn't the struggling single mother he'd imagined drowning in diapers and debt. She wore a white suit that probably cost more than his car, tailored perfectly to her frame. Her hair was styled in intricate braids with gold accents catching the light. Diamond studs glinted at her ears, subtle but unmistakably real. 3 lawyers in dark suits flanked her sides, their expressions professional and utterly terrifying. And in the corner, holding one of the babies, was Nurse Carla, no longer in scrubs but dressed in professional attire, clearly part of Lena's team now. But it was Lena's eyes that stopped him. They weren't filled with tears anymore. They weren't begging or broken or desperate. They were calm. Powerful. Absolutely certain. "Hello, Ethan," she said quietly. "Please sit down." His legs moved on autopilot, carrying him to a chair that suddenly felt like the defendant's seat. The divorce papers he'd thrown at her 3 months ago sat on the table in front of him, signed now, finalized. Next to them was a different folder, thick and official-looking. "I'm glad you could make it," Lena continued, her voice steady and controlled. "We have several matters to discuss. Let's start with custody." Ethan found his voice, forced it to sound reasonable. "Lena, I know I made mistakes. But we share 4 children. We should work together, be civil about." "You'll have supervised visitation," her lawyer interrupted, sliding papers across the polished wood. "Once per month. 2 hours. Location to be determined by Mrs. Walker. Once a month." Ethan's voice cracked. "That's not fair. I'm their father." "A father stays," Lena said, and her words echoed the ones she'd spoken once before, in a hospital room that felt like a lifetime ago. "You left. This is the consequence of that choice." She stood, moving around the table with a grace he didn't remember her having, or perhaps had never noticed. She stopped directly in front of him, close enough that he could see the strength in her eyes that had replaced the tears he'd caused. "You stood in that hospital room," she said softly, just loud enough for him to hear, "looked at 4 babies who'd nearly killed me to be born, and you chose yourself. You chose easier. You chose Vanessa Clark and her Hampton dreams and her father's connections." She paused. "How's that working out for you?" Ethan couldn't answer. His throat had closed completely. Lena returned to her seat. "That brings us to the second matter." Another folder slid toward him. "My uncle's estate included significant commercial real estate holdings, including majority stakes in several development firms." The room tilted. Ethan looked at Mr. Pierce, who couldn't meet his eyes. "I made an offer last week," Lena continued. Mr. Pierce accepted. "I now own 70% of Davidson and Pierce real estate." The words didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. "You bought the company?" "Yes. Which means I own your employment contract. And after reviewing your conduct over the past year, particularly the timing of your affair and divorce, I've made a decision." She nodded to her lawyer, who slid one final document forward. "Termination notice. Effective immediately." "No," Ethan whispered. "No, Lena, please. I have bills. The penthouse. Vanessa expects." "You lost everything the moment you walked out of that hospital room," Lena said, her voice never rising, never wavering. "You just didn't know it yet." She stood, and everyone in the room stood with her. "Security will escort you out. Please surrender your company phone, laptop, and vehicle keys." 2 security guards entered as if summoned. Ethan looked around desperately. At Mr. Pierce, who studied the table. At the lawyers, impassive. At Nurse Carla, who smiled grimly while bouncing his daughter. At Lena, who watched him with eyes that held no anger, no joy, no sadness. Just peace. "Lena," he tried one last time. "Please." "Goodbye, Ethan," she said. "I hope Vanessa's love is worth what it cost you." The security guard's hands were gentle but firm on his arms. They walked him through the office he'd considered his kingdom, past colleagues who wouldn't meet his eyes, into an elevator that carried him down and away from everything he'd thought he was building. His phone rang. "Vanessa." "The card declined," she said immediately. "At Bergdorf's. In front of my friends." "Fix it now." Ethan laughed, the sound broken and hollow. "I can't. I'm fired. Everything's gone." Silence. "Then, you're useless. Don't come back to the penthouse. I'm having the locks changed." The call ended. Ethan stood on the sidewalk outside the building, holding a cardboard box with a stapler and a photo of him and Lena on their wedding day. People rushed past, indifferent to his collapse. Above him, through the glass walls, he could see Lena in the boardroom, holding her daughter, surrounded by people who respected her. Inside, Lena stood at the window, watching Ethan disappear into the crowd. She felt no triumph. No revenge. Just the quiet certainty that she'd survived the worst thing she could imagine, and come out stronger. "You okay?" Carla asked softly. Lena kissed her daughter's forehead and smiled. "I'm perfect." She had everything that mattered. And Ethan had learned too late that the grass isn't greener on the other side. It's greener where you water it. And he'd let his garden die. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that restore your faith in karma.